Welcome back, everybody.
Happy Hump Day.
It's Wednesday. You guys know what that means. This episode's a little extra special.
Just a tad bit.
Yeah, and you know what? I'd even go as far as to say this one's a lot extra special.
Yeah, this is big.
Because we had a big main event Saturday night. Everybody knows about it. Everybody was watching it. Everybody I knew. I'm I'm known as like the UFC guy, you know, in my circles.
Mm-hmm.
However, everybody was watching the damn fight Saturday.
This is true.
I was like, come on, guys. Where were you for Figueiredo Moreno?
Right. We were big on that one. We tried. We tried then.
No, it's fine.
And then when they fight again.
No, it's fine. I get it. I'm joking around a little
Clearly
bit.
Davison as the next Conor.
We saw Dustin Poirier knock out Conor McGregor Saturday night.
Yeah, we did.
Which, let's be honest.
Didn't see that coming.
Didn't really see it coming.
No.
But it happened.
Yes, it did.
And thank God that we decided, or I shouldn't say we decided, but thank God that it played out the way it did to where we're doing this episode after the fight.
This almost came before.
Yeah, because original plan was to do this before. That Wednesday card is what stopped it.
Yeah.
Because we just didn't do a Wednesday episode.
Yeah.
But we could have been doing this episode before the fight, and me being someone who was very confident that Conor was going to win, and you being kind of like 50-50 on the whole thing, I would say. I mean, you wanted Poirier to win. You chose Poirier to win, but
I didn't think it was going to happen.
You thought it was going to be like a decision, war type fight. I just think that video would have been compromised a bit. It would have felt dated already.
This is the perfect time for this.
Yeah, it would have felt very dated.
Win or lose, this would have been the perfect time.
Yeah. So obviously, as you know, we've been setting it up here. We're talking about it, but we haven't addressed what we're doing here. In case you can't tell by the title, this is the State of
Part 2.
Conor McGregor.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for those of you that haven't seen our first part of this series,
a banger.
Yeah, it's about the men's flyweight division in the UFC. Go check that out. Had a lot of fun doing that one. This is a series idea where essentially
so broad.
We talk about the history of a certain aspect of mixed martial arts or promotion, a fighter, a fight,
or MMA as a whole,
a rivalry, anything. Anything. That's what I like about it. But we detail the history of it, and that's meant to kind of paint the picture, as I like to say. So that way you get a full grasp of where we are, like how we got here. And then we talk about the state of and what directions it can go.
Yep.
So for the men's flyweight division, we talked about the inauguration of that division with the 4-man tournament that kind of got botched and Demetrius Johnson's dominant reign. Then Henry Cejudo kind of took things a little more mainstream and ultimately led us to Figgy.
What looked like another dominant champion.
The UFC nearly cutting the division, and then we get Figgy as champ, and how he's looked. At that time, we were talking about how dominant he had looked.
That was before the Moreno.
Yeah, before the Moreno fight, and then we obviously was like, okay, what are some threats to the division? What are some of the most promising aspects of it in the future? We just detailed all of that, but here we're talking about a man's career.
Yes. Not
just any man, the man.
The man, yeah.
Conor McGregor.
The biggest star in combat sports history.
In UFC history. There have been bigger stars. I mean, he's not bigger than Floyd Mayweather.
Star? As a star?
I mean, Floyd Mayweather sold a lot more pay-per-views.
That's because it's boxing. I just think as a overall phenomenon, it's not been close. And like combat sports.
Mike Tyson?
Dude. I mean, you
got
to look at the times we're in. You have to look at the times, too.
I'm just saying.
At the time when McGregor went big.
I think we're getting off track here.
All right.
One of the biggest stars in combat sports history. Now, that's a quote we can agree on. And yeah, we're just going to talk about really his whole career.
Highs, lows, everything in between.
And where does he go from here? Because he is at a bit of a low point right now. The majority of MMA media, or not even, now when he fights, it's not just MMA media, it's all sports media.
Yeah.
So all of the sports broadcasters and the journalists are, including yourself, they are now talking about, is Conor McGregor done? Is he washed? Did he lose? A lot of people are almost like talking down on Poirier because he's not at the star level of McGregor, which is at blasphemous.
That's
We'll talk about that. Yeah. But because of that, he is in a bit of a down spot right now, just based off of the narratives that are at play. I think you'll find that we'll be a little bit kinder to him as far as in his current state, but there is some definite points in here where we're going to have to be real, right? So I think without further ado, we're just going to kind of hop in here, right?
The timeline.
So I'm going to start by asking you a question. Obviously we're going to go all the way back to kind of his beginnings here, but where do you remember, like, kind of when you first took notice of Conor McGregor, like when it was, what fight was being billed, because his rise was it okay? Because his rise was around when you when you started becoming more passionate about it.
Yeah, Dennis Seaver was big. Mm-hmm. That was big, and
that was him headlining a fight night, right?
Yep, and just the way he did it, and the trash talk, the flipping him off during the stare down, and really that was another guy that Conor had already had defeated before they even stepped into the octagon. It was already over with. Similar to how, I truly believe Aldo was already defeated before they ever locked into the octagon. And that was when you really saw, like, okay, this dude backs up what he says, and he's going to do it in dominant fashion. And Seaver at the time, by the way, was no joke. I mean, that was like your way to get to a title shot, which he did following that with Mendez. Interim title shot, I should say. So that was the one for me. Yeah.
Nice. My very first card I watched live was UFC 199. 3 months after that, he was in a rematch with Nate Diaz to kind of avenge his first loss in the UFC. So I kind of started watching right at right as he was hitting that peak, mm-hmm. UFC 205, becoming the 2-division champion. Beating Eddie Alvarez in what is probably the best performance of his entire career. And, the headline, that was the first New York card and first card at Madison Square Garden, I should say. So I kind of missed a lot of that, the Dennis Seaver fight, the Chad Mendez fight. I remember hearing about Conor McGregor because how could you couldn't avoid it. Especially after the lead up to, and then after the Chad Mendez fight, I mean, you couldn't avoid it anymore.
Yeah, and when he one-punched Aldo, it was like.
And I don't remember specifically if I was aware of that knockout or what. I remember one of my earliest memories of Conor McGregor is also one of my earliest of Ronda Rousey, and it was that the night I remember being at a buddy of mine's house the night that I want to say it was. I guess that Conor lost to Nate Diaz.
Okay.
Because that happened after Ronda had lost to Holly Holm.
Yeah.
Both of those two, Ronda and Conor, were on the cover of UFC 2.
So I just remember seeing a meme type thing.
There was a meme with the crying Jordan faces on both of them. And that was one of my, I was like, oh wow, both their top stars must have lost. And I remember being really shocked about Ronda losing, but Conor, I was just kind of like, oh, that must be their big star, huh? Then just a few months later, you would invite me over, watch pay-per-view, and
the rest is history.
Now
we're here talking on a damn podcast.
Yeah. And it has been an interesting ride. I mean, for me to come in, start watching, and you immediately, you see a lot of the, when you're trying to figure out who people are, right? Trying to remember fighters, trying to remember fights, trying to remember all this stuff. I just remember, I'm like, okay, wait, who's that guy? I feel like I've seen him fight before. But then when Conor was up there, it was no question. You couldn't miss him. The way he talked, the way he spoke, the way he fought. You always were, you might not have been a fan of him, but you always knew who he was, regardless of how little you watched or whatnot. And yeah, I mean, that's definitely skipping ahead a bit. I'm just laying the groundwork here for kind of our experiences and how, I've always considered myself to be a Conor McGregor fan. I don't there's not many fighters that I would sit here and tell you that I don't like.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I recognize these are all individuals. These are all people.
Doing the hardest job in the world.
One of the I mean, it's sure like for a guy like Conor, you see the fame, the glory,
the yacht, the cars.
Yeah, you see all the shiny stuff, but you look at what he had to do to get to that point.
I mean, we're talking about a guy that was on food stamps and welfare coming into his UFC debut, and now he's one of the biggest stars in the world, and one of the richest on the Forbes list time after time after time. It's just unbelievable.
I think that's a good way to segue kind of when you go back to the beginning, before even his UFC career. In 2006, he was, like you said, living on welfare. He picked up a plumbing apprenticeship.
Yep.
That was his humble beginnings, because he moved with his family in 2006 to Dublin. While he was there, that's when he would meet Tom Egan, who was a guy who would end up fighting in the UFC later on. And soon after they met, they started training MMA together. So that's kind of where the start happens.
Yeah.
That's where it hits, right? 2006.
The flame was ignited.
He would have been like 18 years old when he started MMA, which is kind of late. It's kind of late for some people.
When you look at...
I know he was boxing at like 10.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it kind of... He's
It's
already
like
been around.
They always seem to start on one discipline at a really young age and then pick up the rest later.
Yep. That's a good way to put it. It's definitely something that you gradually become more and more invested in as you go, and you start with like that one aspect, and then you pick up more and more. But yeah, that's kind of where he starts. But as far as when you want to get into his fighting career, I mean, you really have to start with the fact that he was a 2-division champion for Cage Warriors, I think.
Yeah. The 2-time champ.
Yeah, and still didn't defend either one of those belts either.
This is also true.
That was just a small
Big,
jab, but
big.
Yeah, he was a 2-division champion for Cage Warriors. Cage Warriors, for those of you that don't know, probably one of the bigger, I would say, minor league in quotation promotions. They're very much a breeding ground,
especially in the UK.
Yeah,
that's
for
where
UK
it's real
especially.
big there.
And that's where you saw kind of the star potential form for a guy like Conor. In the UK, they're very passionate MMA viewers, but they're kind of like, as far as MMA promotions go, they're not very much treated like.
Yeah, there's only so many big ones.
Yeah, it seems like the UK, when it comes to mixed martial arts, they have some of the most passionate fans in the world, but MMA promotions don't really give them quite that time of day. Most of the cards are at times that very much appeal to an American audience, but they have to stay up till 5, 6 in the morning.
These pay-per-views that start at 10, they're like 5 hours ahead of us over there, I think, at the earliest, so it's like freaking 3 in the morning when they start, And
because of that, these cards like Cage Warriors, and I'm not saying, I don't know the specifics, but a lot of these cards, these smaller promotions, are more popular in the UK because they're more accessible to your clock, as you want to call it, your sleeping clock. And that's how a guy like Conor McGregor blows up the way he does. It starts there. He was this Irish fighter. He's got the Irish accent. He's got that passionate, just speaking attitude behind him. He very much reminds me of like an Irish guy you might see in a pub, especially back then. And I think that's what gravitated such an audience of those Irish fans to him.
Yeah.
And then he comes to the UFC. First ever fight in the UFC over Marcus Brimage. A fight where he would win via TKO 1 minute and 7 seconds into the fight.
From right there, right from the rip, the power was put on display. Very first UFC fight, very first 2 minutes of his career in the UFC. Now, and that was one of the 2 or 3 times that he was not a main event in his entire UFC career. It's just mind blowing.
He actually his debut was on a Fuel TV card.
Yep, that's what I thought.
Headlined by Gegard Mousasi and Alir Latifi. Pretty sure Lear Latifi was making his UFC debut there. I think he stepped in for a injured fighter.
Yeah.
Pretty sure that's that card.
That was overseas, that fight, wasn't it?
It was in Sweden.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Actually, I'm pretty sure it was supposed to be Gustafsson.
Yeah. Because Latifi trains with Gus.
Yeah, so I think Latifi stepped in his UFC debut to headline a card.
Yeah.
Just fun fact there.
Oh, yeah.
Fuel TV, which I'm pretty sure is not even
a thing
anymore.
No.
But it was a Fox, like...
Yeah.
What do you want to call it? Like
one of their...
Offspring, like one of their side channels. A lot of UFC cards were on there, or FX.
Yeah.
Or Fox Sports 1, whatever you want to call it. There was a few
like
of
the
those.
ESPN 2s, ESPN U's that we see today.
ESPN the Ocho.
Yeah.
He would follow this up, though, on a fight night headlined by Shogun Hua and Chael Sonnen against Max Holloway.
A very young, very green Max Holloway.
Now, I want to tell you, this fight... Listen to some of this, right? So you have... Back at this time, this is, I think, right before Fight Pass was brought around. So your early prelims were usually on Facebook, or YouTube.
Isn't that crazy?
Or both. So on this card, you opened the card. James Vick was the very first fight. After him, Ovin St. Preux.
Wow, this is fun.
And then you get to the prelims, and the third fight, so not even headlining the prelims, was Conor McGregor versus Max Holloway.
In a fight where Conor wrestled almost 3 full rounds due to a torn ACL that happened in the very beginning of the fight. Fought the whole fight with the torn ACL.
Interesting. I actually wasn't aware of that either.
Yeah, and that's one of the longest layoffs Conor's ever had until recently.
Yeah.
Was that year after the torn ACL. And at the time, this Max is not the Max we see today. We're talking a guy that was 21, may have still even been 20 when this fight occurred. So green, and truly just have no answers when the fight got to the ground. Because we're talking about Conor, one of the best strikers in UFC history. He dominated the fight on the ground the whole time. Max didn't know what to do.
It's so interesting.
When it was on the feet, it was actually relatively fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Just to see them both, where they've came from, is unbelievable. So, yeah, that's a little tidbit there, and the torn ACL and all that. But he gets the decision victory.
Yeah. Which
is one of only 2 decision victories he has in the UFC. Every other win coming via finish. So,
another interesting fact: the headline of that prelims was Michael McDonald getting a submission win over Brad Pickett.
Brad one punch.
Yeah, so kind of just interesting facts there. Travis Brown with that front kick over Overeem was the co-main.
No kidding.
Yeah, you got Uriah Faber against Yuri Alcantara. This is actually a
really good fight night. What was the exact date on this?
It was August 17th, 2013.
Man, oh man.
Michael Johnson versus Joe Lozon opened the main card.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good fight night. I'm looking at it. But yeah, 2 big wins. But as you said, one of the longest layoffs in his career from August 2013 until July 2014, so 11 months, no Conor. And it was obvious already at this point that this guy had star potential. You know, I think it's somewhat similar to where we see guys like Kevin Holland or Hamzat at right now.
Mm-hmm.
Probably more Hamzat.
Yeah.
Where it's you see the star potential, but it's man, they really want to just shoot him to the moon.
And that's exactly what they're doing.
And there's a lot of those questions starting to rise about Conor, is he going to be pushed too fast?
Well, and even Edmund is another. We've talked about Edmund many times, you know, with all the hype they had around him, and we saw he did, in fact, get pushed too fast. So
it's always a risk, but then he fights Diego Brandao.
Yep.
Gets a TKO there.
Big name at the time, by the way, for the featherweight division.
Yeah, it's hard to put it in perspective because this is July 2014.
Yeah.
But it was a big name at the time. And again, a lot of people thought that he was going to lose that fight.
Mm-hmm.
Going into it, they're I don't believe in this guy's hype. They're he's had this long layoff. He ain't going to be the same. And then 4 minutes in, he's able to starch him.
And you said that was his first main event?
That was his first main event. Yeah, McGregor versus Brandao.
Now, was that the one?
It was at the O2 in Dublin.
Okay, yeah. So that was the one in Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, man. Honestly, for a again, I said the big one for me was when he beat Seaver.
Mm-hmm.
But for, like, people that have been following UFC or that are older than us and have followed it, that was probably the big moment. When he did that in Dublin.
One of the benefits to him at this time, there's no doubt that he probably would have been headlining a card soon after this, but 2014 was one of the biggest years for UFC events. If you go back and look at some of the events they had that year, some of the headliners, like, I know, again, you put it in perspective, right? But, Conor McGregor and Diego Brandel, I'm not sure if either one of those guys were ranked in this fight.
That's a good point.
So, like,
have to do some digging.
My point is that I think he benefited from the fact that it was a very inflated year for UFC events.
So give him a main event.
So he gets a main event basically because of the fact that they just need the kind of, because this isn't the UFC roster at 600 plus. This is the UFC roster at like 400.
Yeah.
But you have more events than you have in present day.
Yeah.
So imagine trying to fill all those spots with these fighters. You're going to get some main events that...
And they probably saw as soon as Ireland came up on the schedule as a booked venue.
Yeah.
Why not put
Give him a shot
there? Exactly.
After that, he finds his debut on a pay-per-view, UFC 178.
Oh, and who was that against, Noah?
It was against Dustin Poirier. The fight that, has been talked about a lot recently, so we won't harp on it. Obviously, McGregor got the TKO about a minute 46 seconds in. This is another example. This is probably the first example. Like, I know he probably trash talked before this fight, but this was the big one where people were like, this guy beats people before he gets in the octagon. Yeah. Poirier was like, you saw, if you've seen the promo for UFC 257, you heard a lot of those sound bites like,
I've never disliked someone so much in my life.
If McGregor could fight half as good as he could talk, then I think he could beat me.
Yeah.
Things like that. You saw when they were having him stared at when they're touching gloves and stuff. Yeah. I don't know why.
Conor did that.
Yeah, he did that, and Poirier slaps his hand. It completely starched him. And Poirier was very much in that same... He didn't quite have the name power of McGregor.
But was highly ranked.
But he was very looked at as like... This was at featherweight.
Yeah.
But he was looked at as like, this guy might be a future champion of this division. He was a very big prospect. And he got beat pretty easily. Fun fact about UFC 178. Headlined by Demetrius Johnson versus Chris Carriasso. Co-main, Donald Cerrone versus Eddie Alvarez.
How about that? That was Eddie's debut.
Yep.
In the UFC.
Pretty sure Cowboy won.
Yes, he did. Eddie lost his debut.
And then third was McGregor-Poirier. Before that, the two fights before that. This was one of my favorite main cards of all time. Before McGregor-Poirier, you get Yoel Romero versus Tim Kennedy. Stoolgate.
Yeah, that is.
And then to open the main card, Kat Zangano versus Amanda Nunez.
Holy shit. That was the last time Amanda had lost.
Last time she's lost.
That is the last time she's lost, as a
Isn't
matter of fact.
Isn't that so funny what a card that is? You have all of those like legends on that card, and
that
you headline,
you
and Chris Carriasso is headlining.
Yeah.
With Demetrius Johnson, obviously. But, like, what is just interesting...
One of the biggest stars of all time on the card. Greatest women's fighter of all time on the card. It's like, whatever.
Yeah. Chris Carriasso, headliner.
Yeah.
It's just...
Shout out Mighty Mouse.
Yeah. After that, you would see him headline his second card. This would happen on January 18th, 2015. Again, the fight you talked about against Dennis Seaver. This fight was in Boston at the TD Garden.
Yeah, I knew that.
So that made sense, right? The Boston Celtics.
The Irish fans.
Very smart on the UFC's part to kind of... I think it kind of showed that this guy can be global.
Yeah.
And the easy way to kind of do that is where's like a big Irish kind of part of America?
Yeah.
Boston, Massachusetts. That Irish pride, the Celtics, big there. So you kind of push him into there, and now look at him, But he had to win the fight. And Dennis Seaver, he kind of became a meme in the last year. Yeah, I don't know what happened there.
Like Artem Lobov.
But he used to be really good.
Oh, yeah. Built like a brick shit house, too.
McGregor TKO'd him a minute 54 seconds into the second round. Performance of the night
This was
bonus.
like Mystic Mac in its prime.
This is 3 straight performance of the night bonuses at that point.
Yeah.
And then why don't you make it 4? He followed this up. This is where you get into really. After this fight, he was supposed to fight Jose for
so it took Conor 5 fights in the UFC to earn a title shot.
And
5 fights.
I think only the last 2 were against ranked opponents. I want to say Poirier might have been ranked at that time.
Yeah, he was. We'd have to dig on the one with
Dennis Seaver for sure.
Brandao we'd have to dig on.
Yeah, Brandao I'm not entirely sure, but I know Max and Brimage weren't. However, I'm pretty sure Seaver was ranked like 9th at the time, or 8th.
Mm-hmm.
And off that win, Jose Aldo, the king of Rio, the king of featherweight, one of the best fighters of all time.
Yep.
And you set up this world tour.
Mm-hmm.
They really just kind of handed the keys, so to speak, to Conor and let him drive.
Yeah.
You know, Jose does not speak English.
Correct.
So really,
this was backpacked by Conor.
They kind of just...
He put the promotion on his back.
I mean, when you really think about it, the UFC make this world tour where they want these guys to speak a lot.
Yeah.
And you only one of them can speak English.
Yeah.
So they kind of were... They definitely were playing into Conor's hand a little bit. But, same time, get it, you know, Jose, king of Rio, fucking king of featherweight.
Pound for pound, greatest at that time in the world. Hadn't been beaten in 10 years. Hadn't been touched.
And it was an awesome, like, world... It's the first you've really ever seen
That's
anything
what I was
like
about
that.
to
I know
mention.
it's happened a couple times since, and even if you look at Conor when he fought Floyd Mayweather...
Yeah, they did the 4-stop tour.
But... That was the first time you had seen that huge investment in...
For the UFC to do something like that really showed how much they...
I mean, you've never seen them invest in press conferences really before this. They were always kind of low key.
Yeah.
And after this,
they've been a staple of the UFC, really.
They've been highly marketed, highly watched, and that's all really because of him.
Yeah. And
this is where it really was started. And what's funny is he didn't even fight Jose.
Yep, I know. It's crazy.
Wasn't it like, I want to say it was less than a month before the fight?
Something like that. Jose broke his rib or foot or
I don't
something
remember.
like
I
that.
want to say foot, but then RDA, that might have been
RDA was the foot. I think Jose did a rib or something.
Jose has to pull out the fight.
Yeah.
And I remember they have the video where Dana comes into Conor's house.
So badass.
Yeah, and Conor's like...
When I wake up, tell me who I'm fighting.
He's like, I'm going back to bed. Tell me who I'm fighting when I wake up.
Enter Chad Money.
Enter Chad Mendez, who at this point was like the guy.
Dog.
Like if you go past Jose, it's like Chad Mendez is the number one guy at featherweight. If you look at what he was doing at this time, coming into this fight, he was 17-2. His only losses, both to Jose Aldo.
That's what I thought. Both title fights.
Yep. His fight before this McGregor fight, he beat Ricardo Lamas via TKO. But before that was one of the best fights ever, the rematch with Jose, where he nearly won the fight. It was fight of the year for 2014. And he was just on another level back then. He had beaten guys like Darren Elkins, Clay Guida, Nick Lentz, and these were guys that were still high level.
At this time, exactly, yeah.
And then Ricardo Lamas, like I mentioned, Ricardo Lamas overlooked now. He just retired a few months ago, but that guy, when I first started watching, that was when him and Max had the stand and bang moment and stuff. He was if Ricardo wins that fight, he's fighting for a belt.
Title, yeah.
So then he comes into this Conor fight, 17-2.
3 weeks notice.
3 weeks notice. But Conor being the very boxing heavy style,
this is where the wrestler.
It seemed, and it would never stop after this, but it seemed every opponent that Conor would get after this.
This is where we saw.
It was like we saw the start of people.
The haters.
The haters.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that now.
Pointing out.
Nowadays, I can see you not liking Conor McGregor. Back then, I feel like if you just hated on him, you were just hating on him because he's just being skyrocketed and stuff. However, they were saying Conor's being protected from a wrestler, And now he's going to lose, essentially, because Chad Mendes is a great wrestler.
And to Chad's credit, this was the first time we ever saw Conor get tested.
Yeah, now in the first round, I would say Chad won the first round.
The one and only time, well, I guess he may have technically bled against Dustin this past Saturday. The only time Conor has ever bled his own blood in the UFC octagon.
That's interesting. Yeah, and first round, I would have said Chad probably won. Got takedown, nice ground and pound. Conor just kind of hanging on.
Sliced by some elbows is what cut him up. But Conor didn't do terrible from the back.
No.
He kind of even landed his own
Yeah, I
elbows
mean, no,
here
he
and
was
there.
doing good.
But you gotta give it to Mendes.
Then you go in that second round, and Conor starts doing a lot of front kicks to the body.
Beat up Chad.
Beating up Chad.
Him very quickly.
Chad got very tired.
Very gassed.
And I think that...
also on short notice.
Short notice, but also, Chad's not necessarily...
The body work was...
Yeah.
Oof.
And then he drops him.
All that left hand.
That left hand. And that happened... Actually, there was 3 seconds left in the second round. It was a amazing way to kind of cap off that pay-per-view. He won the interim belt. I forgot to say that was for the interim featherweight belt. Performance of the night bonus there. Fun fact about this card, this was UFC 189, the debut of Reebok as the official sponsor of MMA's gear, or of UFC's gear. Co-main event, Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald 2.
Oh my.
Which is what we call the best fight of all time.
And the fight of the year that year.
So imagine watching that card. You get those fights back to back.
What else was on the main card?
Before that, you open the main card. Thomas Almeida getting a flying knee knockout of Brad Pickett. After that, you had Gunnar Nelson getting a rear naked choke submission of a Brandon Thatch. Brandon Thatch, by the way, a guy who looked like he might be a stud at one point in time.
And Gunnar.
Yeah. Jeremy Stevens getting a TKO flying knee and punches win over Dennis Bermudez.
Now hold on. You know what that means? That's 5 fights on a main card, 5 finishes.
5 finishes.
Sign me up.
Headline of the prelims: Matt Brown guillotine submission over Tim Means.
Wow. What a card.
Cody Garbrandt was on this card.
That was probably one of his debuts. That might have been his debut.
I think it was against Henry Briones.
Sheesh, man.
Mike Swick was on this card.
That was probably one of his last fights in the UFC.
He lost to Alex Garcia. Luis Smolka was on the Fight Pass prelims.
His first fights, from the Ultimate Fighter.
So, that's like
that's a hell of a card.
That's a hell
Top
of a
to bottom.
It was the debut of Reebok.
Man, yeah, that's true.
So,
and it delivered.
If you can see how they're really pushing McGregor to lead this charge into the later half of this decade as the star, the face of the UFC. Ronda's there at this point; she's established, but you need that male also counterpart. You need
it was
both.
Perfect storm.
And you had the Reebok deal. You've got this huge pay-per-view.
This portion of the UFC right here, this 2015, like you said, with Conor and Ronda both, and then the Reebok, so on and so forth, is a big, big reason why the UFC sold for so much money the following.
Oh yeah, 100%.
A huge reason.
100%. And what happens after this only helps that number.
Yeah.
So he beats Chad, so it's obvious him and Jose are going to fight again. And this is going to headline UFC 194 at the MGM Grand.
So what was the timing, from Mendes to Aldo?
So it was 189.
189 to 194?
Yeah, so it would have been from July 2015 to December.
Okay.
So our last pay-per-view of 2015, UFC 194, Aldo versus McGregor. More shit talking to lead up, They're face-to-face, and Conor's like, let me closer.
Yeah.
Let me smell his pussy.
Oh.
And you just see Aldo's fucking eyes just red.
Grabs the belt.
Yeah.
Or that was part of the World Tour.
It was one, just
Either
all of
one.
that.
Yeah. The World Tour still
You can
plays
just
into this.
tell that Aldo's fucking pissed.
Yeah.
And people are like, okay, it's been fun. This run McGregor's been on.
But it's Jose Aldo.
But it's Jose Aldo.
Yeah.
There's no way he beats Aldo, right?
One punch.
13 seconds.
Like the only strike that landed, I think. There might have been a leg kick.
13 seconds. A shot he practiced in the back.
That's the... Yeah.
And I think that's...
and that he predicted. He literally said Jose will overextend. He will counter with a left hand and knock him out cold. And it's exactly what happened.
And it happened.
Mystic Mac. He predicts these teams.
He does. And
the rocket ship is to the moon right now.
I mean,
as if it already wasn't.
You just beat
it went from
the best featherweight of all time in 13 seconds after you had already established yourself as like the face of the. He did all this. He was the face of the company before he even won the belt.
Yeah.
And now he just won the belt in 13 seconds.
Yeah. So much so that the UFC didn't even want him to defend the belt.
Well, other fights on this main card.
I like how you're doing this.
Yeah. I'll throw out who was on some names off the prelims. Yeah. Fight past prelims: Yancy Medeiros versus John McDessie. Court McGee on the fight past prelims. On the regular prelims, Warley Alves beating Colby Covington.
We just talked about him.
Mm-hmm. Tisha Torres, Uriah Faber was the headliner of the prelims.
Headliner of the prelims?
Frankie Saenz.
Who was on the main card?
Main card started with Max Holloway versus Jeremy Stevens, unanimous decision win. Damian Maia gained unanimous decision win over Gunnar Nelson.
That was when he was starting to hit that good spot for Damian.
Yoel Romero getting a split decision win over Jacare Souza. And our co-main, Luke Rockhold getting a TKO over Chris Weidman.
I did 2 title fights that night.
Yep.
And now usually when they do multiple title fights, they do heaviest last.
Yeah.
Nope. Sorry, Luke.
And don't get me wrong, Luke Rockhold, Chris Weidman. I mean, especially Weidman being the guy that beat Silva.
Yeah.
You could sell that pretty well.
Weidman was still undefeated then, or like 1 loss or something.
So.
And then he threw the
buy rate of this pay-per-view, by the way, $1.2 million.
Yeah.
Just for comparison, that's what Masvidal and Usman did.
Yeah.
But on a 3 title fight card.
Yeah.
On Fight Island.
Yeah.
You know.
Just put it into perspective.
Yeah. Following this, the plan, there's a lot of talk, who's he going to defend the belt against? Is it going to be an immediate rematch with Jose? That's kind of the big one. Frankie Edgar is another name being thrown around.
But instead, they were going for history.
They decide they're going to have him go up against Rafael Dos Anjos.
Straight killer at the time. Still is a killer.
Who was the lightweight champion.
Yeah.
He had beaten Anthony Pettis, the Wheaties box guy.
Yep.
The guy who people really thought could be another star on that level.
Yeah.
And RDA smashed him.
Yeah.
So then you have another, I don't want to say a tour, but another set of press conferences. This is where Conor says things like, it's break out the red panties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In RDA, he's
at the presser. Conor holds his hand out, and RDA doesn't shake his hand, so Conor poses with his hand out, trying to look like the good guy in the pictures.
Yeah. So the Conor's shit talking was just at another level, and RDA, man, what a guy. Great fighter, great guy.
Poor Brazilians.
Yeah, he just couldn't hang with them when it came to the mic. And that was also where the seeds would be planted for, I believe, McGregor Cerrone. I believe that's the press conference where Cerrone said that they were too big. They're too big. He goes, no, you're slow. Yeah. You're stuck in the mud.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so that fight doesn't happen now.
Nope.
And it still never happened to this day.
And
RDA.
It's looking like it might happen.
Yeah, 2 weeks before the fight, breaks his foot.
Yeah, sort of like a balloon.
It did, like in American football.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
So, who's going to step in, right? In order to find out, we got to rewind. Yep, for like 6 months before. Nate Diaz, a guy who has been fighting for the UFC for, at this point, it had been...
He's grown up in front of our
decade?
eyes.
He'd been fighting in the UFC forever. Ultimate Fighter winner. He was coming off, basically...
Fight night headliner.
Michael Johnson.
Dom.
It actually wasn't the Fight Night headliner.
It wasn't the headliner?
Nope. Headliner was Dos Anjos versus Cowboy 2. Actually, it was the third fight.
No shit.
Co-mained Overeem gained a TKO win over JDS.
Man, look at these fight nights.
Yeah. Opening that fight night card, Karolina Kowalkiewicz and Randa Marcos.
Carolina on a tear at the time, was undefeated.
Headliner of the prelims, Charles Oliveira with the submission over Miles Jury.
Charles? Talk about him a little later, too.
Kamaru Usman beating Leon Edwards was on that card.
The last time Leon
The
lost.
very first fight of that card was Francis Ngannou's debut.
Wow.
With a knockout over Luis Henrique.
We just need one episode where we just pull up like 5 random pay-per-views and go through the whole card.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of fun, isn't
what
it?
happened.
But people, what's funny is I also thought it was the headliner of that box card, but it's not.
Huh.
Third fight of the card, he beats Michael Johnson.
Dominated him.
Unanimous decision.
One of the best performances of Nate's career.
It's true. And now he was coming off a loss to RDA in his previous fight, and that was, after that RDA got a title shot based off that win. So Nate, you could tell, was at the top. But guess how much he made for this fight, Dom?
Wasn't it like $20,000?
$20,000 to show, $20,000 to win. He made $40,000 now.
Little did you know he'd never see that small of a check again.
For people like us, that ain't that's
and $40,000 in a night.
That's pretty good. But when you're one of the top guys in your entire division, it showed that. And this is when Dana said stuff like, "He's not a needle mover. Mm-hmm. His brother's a needle mover." Things like that. Oh. So Nate calls a shot. He's got the biggest win of his career.
Live on Fox, by the way.
Live on Fox. He gets on the mic. And he goes, "Conor McGregor."
There were no beeps on TV. They didn't.
Conor McGregor, you've taken everything I worked for, motherfucker. I'm gonna fight your fucking ass.
Kids, plug your ears.
Yeah, he's like, don't.
You know what the real money fight is?
It's me.
Not these fools you done punked at the press conference.
That's the easy fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the greatest call-outs of all time.
But then nothing came of it at that time, by the way.
Right. However...
Very random.
That happened in December 2015, so right around the time that Conor beat... It might have been the week... It was the week after Conor beat Jose Aldo.
Nate planted the seeds.
But it's not until March. So March is when we get the fight. So not too long, like 4 months, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. It's kind of, I'm sure people at that time, like if we were doing this podcast then, we probably would have been like, why is he calling out Conor McGregor?
Yeah.
That fight will never happen.
Yeah.
Well, he decides that he's going to step in. I shouldn't say he decides, but it's decided he's stepping in here to headline UFC 196.
On just how long of a notice? Like 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, this fight gets moved up to be a welterweight.
Because they couldn't have time to cut the weight?
Yeah, so I mean, there's kind of a shit show here.
Conor weighed in at like 168 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a shit show kind of getting to this point. But he had some awesome press conference moments here, too. They were very small scaled. Like, they were
like in the UFC gym.
Yeah. And he's like, Conor
Nate,
saying,
what's 2 plus 2? Or that was on.
That was on.
or is that part
CNN
2?
Money or something.
Yeah.
They're like, all right, guys, the producers want you to count to 5. He's like,
Nate
can only count to. Or wait,
I think
it's like Nate can, or no, count to 10. He goes, Nate can only count to 5. But then, like at the gym, where Conor's like, he's a little cholo gangster from the hood.
Yeah,
it's like.
Yeah.
He makes gun signs with the left hand and animal balloons with the right hand.
Yeah.
He's like, you're a real credit to your community, Nate.
Yeah.
Just like some great gems there, right? So it's a short lead up, but
Nate's just like, fuck you.
Yeah.
And
he said, fuck you, fuck your belt. I don't give a fuck, motherfucker. I remember they would literally just bleep out everything he said.
Yeah.
This pay-per-view would sell $1.5 million, by the way.
Buys.
Yeah.
Which turns into
$1.5 million buys.
Lots of dollars.
Yeah, it's lots of dollars. Sold very well. One of the best.
And it's crazy because if you look at it, literally in 2 weeks, they got that many buys.
Yeah.
Imagine if they had a whole...
I wonder how much of a difference it was that Nate Diaz was here and not RDA.
I do wonder what RDA would have done. Because
it was still for the second belt.
Yeah.
And Nate... Even though the rematch was definitely sold on both of their star power, Nate, this fight was what kind of gave Nate that push.
Yeah.
Before we talk about that fight, I want to talk about what else was on this card. Fuck it, man. Just doing it. The headliner of the Fight Pass prelims, Diego Sanchez, getting a unanimous decision win over Jim Miller.
The nightmare.
Darren Elkins was on the
The
prelims.
damage.
Eric Silva got knocked out on the prelims. The headliner of the prelims, CR Badarzada,
Nice.
getting a arm triangle submission over Brandon Thatch.
Wow.
And then our
Brandon Thatch mentioned twice on the Conor McGregor episode.
Yep, who would have thought? Our main card started with Amanda Nunez getting a unanimous decision win over Valentina Shevchenko in her first fight.
Yeah, that would earn her the title shot, I believe.
Then you had Corey Anderson getting a unanimous decision win over Tom Lawler.
Yep.
Alir Latifi getting a unanimous decision win over Jean Vellante. And then the co-main, Misha Tate with the rear naked choke submission over Holly Holm. Shocked the world after Holly had shocked the world. And
yeah, Holly was winning that fight and put her to sleep with the rear naked in the 5th.
And this is one of the, I think, 2 instances ever that the UFC have put a title fight below a non-title fight.
Yeah.
So you get Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor. Talk about this fight. Talk about what happens in this fight.
Conor comes out early, guns a-blazing, as we see him do so often. Nate weathers the storm, but does take a barrage of shots. Now, the finish comes in the 2nd, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
right?
it does.
So it comes out again. Conor begins to tire. You see, this is where kind of that, I don't want to call it like a myth, but we talked about this on the preview, where Conor's cardio has been in question ever since this day. And all of a sudden shoots for a takedown because he's so tired. Nate starts landing on the feet. I guess that's what caused Conor to go for the takedown. And as Nate so infamously said afterward, "Oh, so you're a wrestler now." Nate stuffs the takedown, transitions right to full mount, starts landing punches on Conor. Conor turns, gives his back. Nate locks in the rear naked and shocks the world.
And Joe Rogan gets on, goes to interview Nate post-fight. He goes, "Nate, you just shocked the world." "I'm not surprised, motherfuckers."
Enter the needle mover, Nate Diaz, right there.
He's a needle mover.
Yeah, just like that.
So then, 6 months later.
Conor wants to avenge.
I guess really UFC 200 was supposed to be headlined by the rematch between Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz. Actually, I think that was the original headliner, and then that got taken off because Conor no-showed a press conference.
Yep.
And I believe that's when Daniel Cormier, John Jones got put in there.
Yep.
And then John Jones tested positive the day before the event, and then Daniel Cormier fought Anderson Silva, and then Amanda Nunez, Misha Tate headlined the card.
Yeah.
Weird stuff. But I believe when they were supposed to fight at 200, is that when the water bottles or the gate or the monsters?
That actually happened.
That was 202. Okay.
Yeah.
So the rematch is looking like it's good. They're trying to book it immediately because of how big that people want
keep
that
the momentum.
Fight. And it made sense. I know Nate beat Conor decisively, but at that time I think it was warranted to have a rematch because Conor was fighting out of his weight. At least it looked like at the time. Nate only having 2 weeks to prep.
Conor wanted to get this rematch, and he said, "I have to do it at 170. I lost at 170. I have to win it at 170."
Yeah,
I do respect that.
So then UFC 202, the press conference.
Yeah, the water. Nate shows up late. One of them showed up late.
I think
they always.
I think Conor shows up late, but because Conor showed up late,
Nate left early.
Nate left early.
Yeah.
But then Nate comes walking back in through the back.
Yeah.
And he's just got his whole posse with him, and they're flipping off McGregor.
And then
Conor starts
throwing
water bottles and monster. And
Conor.
One of the hardest I've ever laughed. It's like Conor.
That's it. That's done. We're done.
And he's just yeeting these fucking full bottles into the crowd.
Then they both had to pay fines for that.
Yes,
because there's live audience there. Could have injured somebody with a bottle of water.
So
throwing cans of Monster that are empty.
Fun fact about this fight, this rematch at 202. This one is near and dear to our hearts.
Yeah.
It's the first pay-per-view
We're old.
we've ever watched at a B-Dubs. Which to most people would be like, all right, get a room.
But specifically in Bowling Green.
Well, it's more so just before pre-pandemic, going to B-Dubs was a monthly thing for us to watch pay-per-views.
That's true. That started the tradition.
Yeah, so that was like the first, and it was our first month at college or whatnot, you know. So
youngins.
We hold a special place.
You know, because the very next pay-per-view was in Cleveland that we attended.
So we're there for this one. So
full house.
Less surprises, I guess, that I'm going to tell you here of what happened on this card. Maybe some will. Our very first fight on the Fight Pass prelims, Marvin Vettori getting a guillotine choke submission.
The Italian Dream.
Right after that, Colby Covington TKOing Max Griffin. And you headlined the Fight Pass prelims with Lorenz Larkin getting a TKO over Neil Magny. Now to the actual prelims. Courtney Casey getting an armbar submission over Randa Marcos. Artem Lobov getting a unanimous decision win.
Nick Connor's one of training partners of Conor, I should say.
Raquel Pennington getting a unanimous decision win. Headliner of the prelims, Mr. Cody Garbrandt.
Look at him.
TKOing Takeya Mizugaki.
The evolution.
And actually that would be the fight that
earned him a title shot.
Which is crazy because it was on the prelims.
Yeah.
Our main card.
Now I remember one. Very, very good.
Tim Means getting a TKO over Sabah Hamasi. Mike Perry getting a TKO over Hyun Gyu Lim. Donald Cerrone getting a head kick TKO over Rick Story.
Wow, that was on that.
Anthony Johnson.
Yeah.
With the 13-second knockout of Glover Teixeira.
One punch uppercut.
He said, anything you can do, Conor, I can do better.
Yep.
And then Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz have one of the best fights of all time.
Yes.
It's a 5-round war. It's the definition
It's on
of
our
a war.
list, right?
Yeah. It's the definition of a war. Conor McGregor edges out a majority decision. One of the judges
had it a
draw. The other two had it for Conor.
I thought when we were there that night, did we just say it should be a draw?
We said it should be a draw.
Yeah.
I went back and rewatched it this summer.
We both agree.
I think Conor won 3 rounds to 2 clearly. I guess the thing about this fight was the naysayer said Conor has no cardio because he got tired in the first fight.
But he wins the 5th round.
He won the 5th round.
Yeah.
And yeah, he did tire out in those like 3rd, 4th.
He tired in the 3rd, was tired halfway through the 4th, then had like a resurgence at the end of the 4th, and then the 5th, like we said, he won.
Yeah. And he redeems himself. So now the question is, you have to do the trilogy, right? Wrong.
Yeah, now here we are.
Because he's back on track. Nate Diaz was mostly... At this point, it looked like Nate Diaz was simply
a
stepping stone. And it was like, okay, he lost the first time. Well, we got to redeem it in order to make sense for him to go up to lightweight and become a 2-weight.
Or in this case, go down.
Or yeah, I guess so. Become a 2-weight division champion.
Yeah.
You know, so now UFC 205, it's the first event at Madison Square Garden. It was the first event the UFC had in New York in like...
It had just become legal in the state.
I want to say 20 plus years. Because it was illegalized back in the 90s. We talked about that with UFC 1, I think. Or maybe we talked about it in a different episode. But
the badass promos, 3 title fights.
UFC 205 at Madison Square Garden.
Yoel, the nasty flying knee. Ugh. Bloodbath in the octagon.
Some other fights on this card. Liz Carmouche defeated Caitlin Chukagian. Jim Miller defeated Thiago Alves. Those were both on the Fight Pass prelims. Vicente Luque knocked out Bilal Muhammad. Tim Bosch TKO'd Rafael Natal. Habib Nurmagomedov.
Michael Johnson.
Got the Kimura over Michael Johnson.
And the infamous speech. Post-fight.
Yeah, so Habib kind of planting the seeds for him and Conor.
He's doing his own little Nate Diaz part.
Blood rivalry at this point. He says, UFC, I want your chicken. He said,
I want to fight with
Irish, only 6 million. Russia, 150 million.
Everybody's booing him.
The Eagle.
Little did they know they'd have to bow down.
And I'm pretty sure when we were watching that night, we were like, what's this dude even talking about? Like, who's this guy?
It was random for him to call out Conor.
Yeah, like it just seemed like it came out of nowhere.
But at that time, fight with him and Michael Johnson was essentially a number 1 contender fight.
Well, you have to realize what really led into, like, people like, for me, I should say, not you. You were definitely like a hardcore fan at that point. I was hardcore into it, but I didn't have hardcore knowledge about it. But that's a good way to put it. Dana basically used Habib as like a as a negotiation tool in order to get Conor to sign on for this fight, because he kept telling the media, no, it's Khabib versus Eddie. That's the fight that's going to happen.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, Conor steps in. Khabib finds out, I believe, over social media. And then
that's where the hatred started.
And then he's matched on the prelims after he was supposed to headline with Michael Johnson. So you can see why he might be a little bit bitter.
Yeah, because before that, they had pictures together, Khabib and Conor.
Yeah, he was a fan. It's like you were
train
a fanboy.
Yeah, it's crazy. It really is. We'll talk about those two again.
Headlining the prelims was Frankie Edgar beating Jeremy Stevens. Main card, Raquel Pennington beating Misha Tate. You know, we know these. Yoel Romero splitting open Weidman's head with the
It looked like a WWE freaking bloodbath.
Then you get the 3 title fights. Joanna Jędrzejczyk over Karolina Kowalkiewicz.
That was a good fight.
Good fight. And then fight of the night.
Oh, yeah.
Tyron Woodley, Stephen Thompson fight to a draw. Tyron Woodley nearly knocks Thompson's head off in like the 3rd round. Nearly finishes him like 3 times. Thompson stays alive.
One of the few title fights you ever see.
I mean, Thompson won more rounds, but he got 10-8.
Yeah.
And main event,
the
Conor
best
McGregor
performance of his career
versus Eddie Alvarez. I mean, if you want to look at that press conference in the lead up, oh my gosh, Jeremy Stevens,
poor guy.
They say, question asked to Conor, which person on stage would give you the toughest fight? Conor's looking around, probably trying to think of what smart ass thing he's gonna say.
Yeah.
Jeremy
should have not have.
Jeremy goes, me. I'm the hardest hitting 145 pounder in this whole division. He goes, when he hits people,
he
TKOs people. When I hit people, they don't even fucking move. And then Conor says those words.
Conor looks up to the left, looks back to the audience, and says, who the fuck is that guy? And the audience exploded.
And
Jeremy tried to just be like, you know who I am.
But you could tell.
But it's like it's overridden by the crowd noise and laughing.
You could tell that they're just like, oh,
everybody, all the fighters on stage, dying, laughing. It was
So yeah,
there was a murder.
That was a 10-7 for Conor.
Yeah.
There were some other good gems on there. I love when the people asking questions were supposed to be just press. And then a guy comes on there.
One got battered. Eddie,
he goes, Eddie, you talked about Conor's ability to go 5 rounds. When you've only went 5 rounds 3 times in your career and lost 2 of them, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? And the guy didn't hear him, or Eddie didn't hear him, and he goes, wait, what did you say? What did you say? And he asks again. Conor goes, he said, why are you talking shit? And, so it was pretty funny stuff. I remember watching it was like we'd get the sundial and we'd just prop the phone up on the napkin holder. Just watch the press conference.
If you know, you know.
Yeah, if you know, you know. So, it's the best performance of Conor's career. I mean, yes, the Jose knockout.
But this was historical.
I mean, this was a complete one-sided beatdown.
Yeah, for a round and a half. And then he got...
So calculated. I shouldn't even say a beatdown, It was just so calculated. Eddie was never in the fight. No. The precision, the power.
Another guy, too, probably beat before he got in the octagon.
Honestly, and I remember sitting there, I was like, going into the fight, I'm like, I think Eddie might win this fight. I'm like, he didn't seem like he was phased.
The underground king, too,
it's just a guy that, like,
came from nothing.
Yeah, so raw, just, I was like, there's no way that, like, this trash talk's really going to, like, break a guy like that. Yeah. I don't even know if it was a trash talk. I mean, that performance speaks for itself.
Yeah,
it was just complete calculated affair and
2 belts.
What a way to cap it off, right?
The first ever 2-weight simultaneous champion in the UFC.
I want to take this moment to apologize.
Absolutely nobody.
The champ does whatever the fuck he wants.
It was fantastic. Crowd's
apologies for the shitty accent, by the way.
Eh.
We're just we're having a trip down memory lane here at this
Conor,
point.
If you want to help us with the accent.
Yeah, exactly. So 205. I mean, at that moment, we knew that like Conor is bigger than the sport.
Yeah.
That was
and literally actually it came.
And I mean that basically is. I'm not just saying that in hindsight. I think at that time it was very clear that it felt like the UFC needed him more than he needed the UFC. This pay-per-view sold 1.3 million. The Nate Diaz rematch, 1.65 million. buys. I believe by this point only like 5 or 6 pay-per-views have sold over 1 million, and he was on all but one, UFC 100, I think. So it was very clear, his
Star
influence,
power.
his star power,
I mean, he said, without me, this whole ship sinks.
Yeah, and he wasn't wrong too.
And that was in regard to the company being sold. The company had just been sold prior to 205.
That's true.
Funny
that's
enough.
True.
So.
And here's where we get to kind of a weird part in his career, right? Because after this, he's got 2 belts, right? So.
And he all of a sudden stops fighting in MMA.
And there were challengers waiting for him in both divisions. Max Holloway, Jose Aldo at featherweight.
Habib.
And then you got Habib. Anthony Pettis is still around at lightweight. Cowboy Cerrone's still around. RDA's still around.
Yeah, the fight that never came.
All these fights are there.
He said,
He said, I'm going to go box Floyd Mayweather. You guys cool chilling for a little bit?
Dana said, yeah, sure.
So, the fight that I remember seeing, like, people... I thought this fight would never happen. I was like, there's no way.
Yeah, even when the talk started
I just felt like, I was like, this is all for publicity, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, this ain't really going to happen.
Yeah.
And now, like, it's much more believable. Like, these last few years, and really just recently, you got the Mayweather-Logan Paul, the Mike Tyson, Roy Jones, and the co-main Jake Paul, and now Jake Paul's been confirmed to box Ben Askren here soon.
Well,
That's a story for another time. But it's much more believable for something like this to happen now. But at this time, I mean, you just didn't see this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Boxing stuck the... the closest things we had to crossovers was like James Toney coming from boxing, and he got smashed by Randy Couture. CM Punk coming from the WWE, getting smashed by Mickey Gall.
Fun fact, we witnessed that debut.
Yes, we did. And then got smashed by Mike Jackson. So, not a lot of crossovers here. But Conor's going to boxing to fight maybe the best boxer in history. And, yeah.
World tour.
He hadn't defended his featherweight belt since he won it. Well, he'd never defended it. I mean, UFC 194 is the event he won it. UFC 205 is when he became double champ. That's 11 months.
Yeah.
And I believe he wouldn't be stripped until UFC 212.
Yeah, UFC 200, we got an interim champion. Jose beat Frankie to get the interim belt. So we just had an interim champ and a undisputed.
Well, maybe it was around 206 then, because...
When he vacated?
Yeah. Because they must have stripped him or he vacated right after 205.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. It was whenever...
Because 206 was headlined by an interim featherweight bout between Max Holloway and Anthony Pettis.
Right.
So they must have made Jose
Jose just got the belt back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what happened.
So it was about a year without defending. Jose's reinstated as champion, but really nobody looks at him as like the champion. However, Max Holloway beats Anthony Pettis to earn his shot, and they would fight at UFC 212. Max Holloway would win. And
this is when Max Holloway's starching everybody.
While at lightweight, you get the closest thing you get to like a direction is UFC 216. You get an interim lightweight title fight between Tony Ferguson and Kevin Lee.
Yep.
Tony Ferguson getting a big win there.
It was that long ago.
Again, he won the belt at 205. That's 11 months later. Conor goes on to box Floyd Mayweather.
August of 2017.
Yep, and he looks good.
He
puts on a better fight than I think
rounds.
most people would have thought.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, he was going up. He is a guy who's never had a professional boxing fight, going up against one of the best boxers of all time. He
49-0 at the time, turned out to be 50-0 after this.
He lost.
10th round TKO.
I think it was 10th round TKO, yeah. And he never went down.
That's true.
Which will be a point maybe for later.
Yeah.
But he was out on his feet, basically.
And
after that, there was a lot of questions. Is Conor ever going to fight in MMA?
Well, they said, he made $100 million off that fight?
Yeah, so it's like, why would he fight in MMA again? There was talks about maybe a Manny Pacquiao fight, which is still
are to this day.
A rematch with Floyd Mayweather. Just, stuff that's like, it's like, okay, this is where I think the biggest this is the biggest turning point. UFC 205 was a huge moment where it felt like Conor's
That
fandom.
fame.
The fandom, I think, was at its all-time most positive.
Mm-hmm.
But then after this lead up to the Floyd fight and after the Floyd fight is where you see the big amount of detractors, the people that don't like
It's
him.
almost like, okay, did the money play a factor? Or the fandom. Getting
And-
all this thrown on you at such a young age. And
Well, you have these. You got a guy with 2 belts. He's holding up multiple divisions. Going to box.
he has the UFC in the palm of his hand.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people didn't like that, and we didn't like that. I was kind of getting tired of him. I was like, I just want him to just move on. If you're not gonna fight, don't fight. Well, just give us a direction, right? Give us an answer. Well, he kind of, for a while, it looks like he's just. I mean, it was 2 years before he came back.
But in April of 2018, there was a thing about a bus.
The lead up to UFC 223,
Brooklyn,
which
New
was
York,
going to see our first undisputed
champion for lightweight.
since him. He was being stripped. And it was going to be originally between Tony Ferguson, who was the interim champ, and Khabib Nurmagomedov.
That would have been the 4th time that fight was scheduled.
Tony
Tripped over a cable.
Completely blew his knee.
Yeah.
So then they inserted Max Holloway,
Mm.
who was the featherweight champion.
Coming up.
And then he had to drop out of the fight.
Yeah, the commission said he couldn't safely make the weight. So then we're left with 2 days out from the event.
Then it was Anthony Pettis. Pettis wanted more money.
Paul Felder wasn't ranked high enough.
Which
is funny to think about now.
So then you end up with Ali Quinna.
Number 9 ranked, Raging Al,
Yep.
the real estate agent.
Yep.
The hometown guy. You know, New York.
Yep, true. And
Habib smash. But
But
Al went 5 rounds with Habib.
he did.
I
But
will
let's
say.
talk about the bus.
Oh yeah, I guess I got ahead of myself and I brought up the bus.
Talk the bus.
The fighters are on a bus going to pre-fight presser or media day, I think.
Were they
something
leaving
like that,
from
or
doing
leaving
that?
media day? And the bus is just chilling in the parking garage, and all of a sudden this big gang of people charge the bus that Habib is on, led by none other than the notorious Conor McGregor.
I remember being in our dorm room as this shit's happening.
Yeah.
And we're just like...
The internet broke this day.
And I'll let you continue because I want to talk about where our minds were at this point, what we thought, but continue.
Conor has a dolly. Now, dollies are used to move large boxes, refrigerators,
Right.
make it easier.
Yeah.
Well, he picked up the dolly, charged at the bus, and threw it through the window of the bus.
And that's not what a dolly is meant to be used for, correct?
No. Dollies are meant to be nice, not mean. This dolly, thrown by Conor, took 2, 3, 4 fights off of the fight card.
I mean,
including gashes to Rayborg's eye that required surgery.
Chiesa
cut in the face.
Yep, and then
Rose's mental health was in shambles after this
even
fight.
though she did still fight.
Yes, true.
And won.
But, nevertheless.
Yeah, there was...
She was very...
compromised.
Yes.
But she's just on another level.
For the foreseeable future. Yes,
she's
true.
just
Thug Rose.
Yeah.
Thug Rose.
But
yeah, he threw a dolly through a window.
So he flees.
And
Habib's trying to get off the bus.
And they won't let him.
They won't let him.
Thank God. Oh, yeah, then they flee the arena.
They flee the arena.
Artem Lobov, by the way, in that gang, was scheduled to fight that night and never fought in the UFC again after partaking in those.
Yeah. And that makes sense.
Yeah.
And now he's at Bare Knuckle FC.
Yeah,
So,
we're like,
Conor's arrested. Well, at first, before he's arrested, I mean, I think when we first hear about it, he's fled the scene and there's a warrant out for his arrest.
Yeah, Dana has never been so mad, I don't think, ever before.
And I remember you specifically going, Conor McGregor will never fight again.
Yeah, I thought that was it.
And, of course, there were
especially after all that Dana had done to help get him that Mayweather fight, and then he does this.
Yeah. And, truth be told, I mean, there was a lot of people online talking, come on, guys. Do you really think that Conor and his team were able to just sneak by? They're like, really think about it. All those cameras just so happen to be there, filming them as they show up. Conspiracy guys, right? So they start saying that this was all part of the plan.
Yeah.
And even Michael Chiesa, I believe, had a lawsuit for a while with the UFC where he said that...
Well, and against Conor.
Yeah, and he said that it was planned by the UFC, I believe. So, look, do I think that? No, I feel like there's too much. There's too much to risk there for a fight that would have been huge. A company
would never do that.
For a fight that would have been huge no matter what.
Yeah.
And I guess to be fair to Conor, we should say why he did this.
Oh, that is true.
Habib
and the gang.
Artem Lobov essentially called Habib a chicken, I think, which for us Americans, we go, well, okay.
Them's are fighting words.
In Russia, that's apparently like that's like worse.
I mean, Habib called Conor.
It's one of the worst insults you can be called. So I don't think Artem called him a chicken, but I think it was
implied. He
basically was like, "Oh, he called Conor a chicken. Well, Conor's never pulled out of a fight, so who's the real chicken?" kind of thing. So basically, Habib
him and the gang.
Habib and probably like Umar and all the boys. I don't know, just a few of the lads.
DC. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
They surround Artem, and Habib does like the Godfather Godfather pat, and he's it's like he's like a
talk now.
Yeah, shaking him down a little bit.
Apparently, Conor and the squad saw that and immediately got on a jet and flew from Ireland to Brooklyn, New York.
And that's where Dolly stuff happens. Conor flees the scene. You believe there's no chance he ever fights again. I'm just like, what the fuck is happening?
And instead of him never fighting again, it led to the biggest pay-per-view in UFC history.
Instead of never fighting again, he gets arrested.
Yeah.
But out on bail.
Yeah.
I believe he gets some sort of parole.
Yeah. Has to take anger management.
Yeah,
or something, all that.
I'm sure it was so hard for him.
Yeah. And what was so, the day of just utter disbelief and just nastiness for the UFC, let's use it for a promo package, huh?
And 6 months after this incident,
October of 2018,
Conor would fight again.
Yep.
And it would be the headline for the lightweight belt against Habib Nurmagomedov.
UFC 229.
The highest selling.
2.4?
Yeah, sounds right to me.
2.4 million pay-per-view buys. Not even been close.
So,
anything else?
6 months. Habib beats Al Iaquinta.
Oh yeah, Habib.
And this was his first title defense. And not a lot of people were very happy with, and including us. We wanted to see Habib and Tony.
Yeah.
But Tony was supposed to be out for like a year with his injury.
Yeah.
Well, guess who co-mained this card?
Tony Ferguson. 6 months after tearing his fucking knee to
shreds. His ACL, MCL,
all the L's.
PCL.
Yeah.
HDMI.
And dominates in the process, too, in that fight.
Anthony Pettis, yeah. So, yeah. Interesting lead up to this one, right? These are when the press conferences become a little less fun.
It gets too personal.
Conor's a bit drunk, I would say, at the press conference.
This was when a lot of things were being said about Conor.
This is Conor had debuted his whiskey, Proper 12, and it was a huge seller, obviously.
Became a sponsor of the pay-per-view.
Yep. But like in one of his unveilings of the whiskey at a bar, he took a left hand, punched an old man and square in the face.
That was after the Habib fight.
Was it?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that was during his second hiatus.
Yeah. So
but still,
that did happen. But okay, so going into this fight, Conor's just he seems so bitter, so just angry.
Yeah.
And he kind of attacks.
This wasn't the normal trash talk.
This wasn't the normal trash talk. This was,
very personal, religion,
it was,
family.
Talking about religion, family.
Things you just shouldn't.
He's he's pouring himself whiskey. He goes, come on. He's like, it's shit on the bus's birthday. Why don't you drink?
Yeah.
Why don't you drink? And
it was uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable. And this is where the press conferences just aren't as fun.
Yeah.
So you get this fight, and it's still a huge fight, though. Everybody's still stoked for it, obviously.
I think we had... Was that
we had 8...
my apartment?
Yeah, there was a few guys that
we had 8 different restaurants that delivered pizza.
Yes,
to
that's
the apartment.
true.
That was fun.
And we see a pretty one-sided fight, I would say.
Yeah. Conor did technically become the first man to win a round over Habib on scorecards in the 3rd round, but it was Habib smash.
Yeah, Habib
and in
smash.
The 4th, tires out Conor, drags him, and chokes him out.
And then...
Oh, yeah. The entire arena gets into a fight. No, I'm just kidding.
And then Khabib throws his mouthpiece.
And soars like an eagle.
He
through the sky. That's why it's called the eagle.
He hops over the cage. The security try to grab him. They can't.
He
literally tries to drop kick.
Yes, drop kick Dylan Danis.
Dylan Danis, who is McGregor's jiu-jitsu coach.
Yeah.
And then a brawl breaks out while
Conor's in the octagon like, what the fuck? He's still getting his wits about him.
And
then Khabib's boys... Habib jumps out of the octagon. Habib's guys jump into the octagon.
One of them was...
Umar.
Well, I was going to say Islam Makhachev.
He would have been one of them.
I believe he got suspended for a year after this.
Was Zubaira?
I don't know. It might have been.
I don't know. There were a lot of them.
But two guys jump in and just start socking McGregor in the face.
Yeah.
Madness. There's some... Dana, I've never seen him more sad.
No,
and this was a record-setting night.
Yeah.
He said the governor was here.
Yeah.
Said the governor had to run out of the building.
Yeah.
Not a good look.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just
the belt, have images. The ceremony never happened.
I just have images of like the governor running out of
like something you'd see in White House Down.
Yeah. So yeah,
it was bad.
It was bad.
That was a bad year for the UFC, but great at the same time.
Yeah, and so Conor, another a down point here, right?
Yeah, we get another hiatus out of this.
Another hiatus. Just a lot up in the air, you know. He just does. You don't hear
He was more quiet during this hiatus.
You know, some accusations start coming about. Yeah. Then you have him punching the old man in the face. So it's just kind of like, okay, is this guy like spiraling right now?
Maybe he's done.
He seems bitter on Twitter. Like the way some of the things he's tweeting, like talking about the fights and things. He just seems real bitter. Some real personal shots at guys like Khabib and Gaethje, even like some real personal, just
yeah,
not a great look. And somewhere it just kind of flips.
Yeah,
because he went from UFC 229.
You know, I'm going with the family and the children
to UFC 246, where he would fight Cowboy Cerrone. That's 17 months, basically, over a year. Somewhere midway through, and really, it's when they announced him and Cerrone. Cowboy had a huge win. I want to say
Cowboy was on a tear.
I want to say it was against Ally Aquina and
dominated him in a 5-round.
I think that was the fight.
Main event.
I think that was the fight. He won that, and I believe Conor said, like, "Congratulations, I will fight you now."
Yeah.
And Conor, in the whole lead up to this fight, though, super respectful.
This was
complete
a new
180.
Conor. Yeah.
And we're gonna attribute that to the family aspect. You know, he had kids at this point.
And we've seen it even more now, like in 2021. I really think he has done away with the bitterness, the nastiness. Now, if him and Khabib were to ever lock it up again, I think it would get ugly, but not like it ever was.
Well, Khabib said, "I will humble him."
Yeah,
and humble him he did.
Yeah, I'm gonna attribute it to family, maybe just a break from all the shit.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, his kids now, 2 children, 1 on the way. But regardless, now he's all of a sudden gonna fight Donald Cerrone, and it's gonna be at 170 pounds.
Yeah.
And he walks in to start his season, so-called, in 2020.
This was the start of 2020.
And starches Donald Cerrone. 46 seconds? Absolutely just demolished him. And from there on said he wanted to fight 3 more times in 2020 and start a season and work his way back to the title. Unfortunately, COVID makes its way into the United States and all throughout the world. Everything gets shut down in March, and we never see Conor McGregor again in all of 2020. Remains quiet, remains, you know, shouting, calling out people on Twitter when fights get back in May, the Gaethjes, the Fergusons, all that fun stuff. But we never see him again in 2020. Near the end of 2020, all of a sudden, he tweets at Dustin Poirier. Says, "Hey, how about you and me?" This was after Dustin beat Hooker in June, so this is like September, October of 2020, because the fight got announced in November. He goes, "Hey, let's do a charity fight in Dublin, exhibition. All the money goes to charity. The Good Fight Foundation and Conor's charities in Ireland." And I'm like, oh? Wait a second. I mean, I'm down.
Yeah.
I'm in. Sign me up.
Yeah, and I'm pessimistic.
Yeah,
I definitely was like, this fight won't happen.
But it took this out of McGregor and Poirier for the UFC to say, all right, let's make this fight.
They didn't seem to. The UFC kind of like it seemed like McGregor and Poirier kind of had to
force it.
Because Poirier was kind of in a weird spot with the UFC.
Poirier was in a spot where he was, turning down fights because he wasn't getting paid enough. He was supposed to fight Ferguson.
Yeah.
Rumored he was was offered Chandler, but was wanting more money.
Right.
UFC was not agreeing to that. Then Conor calls out Dustin and says, hey, I didn't get any fights either. This is after Conor releases text messages from him and Dana saying he wants to fight Diego, and Dana's like, we should not get a promoter's license if we make that fight and all this. So Dana's mad at Conor again. A lot of shit.
Right.
So for the most part, Conor was out of the limelight in 2020, but he's always there.
Yeah.
He's always there.
He just kind of pops up, right? And
but it leads us to where we are today.
It really does, because basically UFC booked the event after Conor at first says, we'll do a charity boxing fight and all this stuff, and it's like, that ain't gonna happen. But the UFC's like, all right, fine.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
In a fight that actually made sense, though. A big fight.
So it was the first pay-per-view of 2021. Obviously, there's
happened. Only so much we can say about this one.
Yeah, I mean...
It's where we are now.
Yeah, and Conor in the lead-up, very respectful again.
Makes a $500,000 donation to the Good Fight Foundation.
Everything's very respectful, but also it's very competitive, too, in the lead-up. You can tell that, these guys are both very confident. Mm. But they're very nice to each other, but it does feel still intense at the same time.
There's just an aura around a Conor McGregor fight week and fight night that you just can't escape. And Conor looked
super loose.
Yeah.
Dustin looked
Physically, looked amazing.
Dustin looked a little shaky, a little nervous. Fight night happens, though, and Conor had his moments early, but...
Good first round.
Yeah, good first round. I thought he won the first round, but, I mean, he only hurt Dustin with, the one punch.
Yeah.
Second round happens. Dustin continues with the leg kicks, the calf kicks that completely neutralized Conor's leg, completely neutralized his movement, where he couldn't back out of Dustin's shots near as fast. And Dustin
became the first man to ever KO TKO, and we stand by a knockout.
Yeah.
Conor McGregor in the professional MMA.
Yeah, in the second round. So what a moment for Dustin, but that leads us to where we are now.
So this is coming off of our recap Monday.
Please.
And it's like, okay, what do we do with Conor here?
Right.
Now,
what a lead up, by the way. Just want to say
we went on a deep
tear
dive,
right
huh?
Yeah.
If you're still listening, or if you had to take a couple breaks, we appreciate you.
We appreciate you sticking with us.
No script on these.
I mean, come on. How can you can't skip past a lot of that, though.
And so here we are. And let's get this out of the way. We both agree that the next fight should be Conor and Nate 3. There's never been a better time to do the trilogy. Conor's coming off of a loss. He's on technically 2 losses in a row at lightweight. Mm-hmm. There's a win in between, but it was at welterweight against Cerrone. Diaz also coming off a loss at welterweight for the BMF title to Jorge, but before that had won against Pettis. Now, was that fight with him and Pettis at lightweight or welterweight? I cannot remember. But when Nate beat Pettis. Was that welterweight?
Welterweight, okay. I think.
So Nate's not been at lightweight in a while either, but it is by far and away both of their natural best weight classes for performance. And this is the fight we need. We talked about this on Monday. It's been almost 5 years since that second fight between Conor and Nate happened, which is mind-blowing to me. We're really just getting old here, Noah, sitting in the studio. But now's the time. Conor is now ranked 6. The rankings came out today. We record these on Tuesdays. He moved back to number 6. Nate is not ranked. It's a trilogy. It's 1-1. I think it needs to happen at 155 pounds. And whatever happens after that, that's for another episode. But what's next immediately, it's trilogy for me. Mm-hmm. But there's some rumblings.
Well,
I'll let you go on.
So I agree. I think we need to get more into the context as
his career.
There's more. Well, no, hold on. I'm not. I think it's good to talk about what's next. I mean, that's what we're doing, but more into why is it Nate Diaz?
Right.
So specifically, there's more to it than just the trilogy aspect. if you want to go by rankings, which we do a lot, Conor should be fighting a guy like Rafael dos Anjos or
which is a fight years in the making
Tony
as well.
Ferguson or
I do
Dan,
love that.
Dan Hooker or
Right.
someone like that.
Yeah, it's almost like, okay, Hooker and Conor both lost, main and co-main. We should do them. You know?
The problem is that Conor has
Yeah,
put himself in a position where he is bigger than the sport, right? So he cannot be
We talked about this
a
forever.
co-main event.
Yeah, he can't. Conor cannot be anything but a main event of a pay-per-view.
Right.
We're not saying a main event on a fight night. He'll never touch a fight night again, ever. He cannot be anything but a main event of a pay-per-view.
And part of
And
me
that's a
thinks,
problem.
And this is kind of where we get into, like, where do we think he is now, right? So, truthfully, do you ever foresee Conor McGregor fighting for a belt again?
That's a tough question, man.
It's a tough question, I know.
So Ariel asked the same question to DC, and he kind of reacted the same way I just did. But it's like, I don't know. And the inactivity doesn't help. That's
No.
why we need activity this year out of Conor.
Right.
We do need that. But it's like, okay, say we do get Conor Nate. It'll be a main event. It'll be a pay-per-view, obviously. Trilogy's huge. That's just the fight that makes the most sense. But let's say Conor does beat Nate. Nate's unranked.
Yeah,
So
technically.
so you got to just think though, from a rankings and title picture perspective, what does it actually do for Conor to get to a title? Because in my eyes, well, you got to win one more. You have to beat someone else to get to the title shot. And you're looking at the division now. Chandler just debuted in a big way. Now he's ranked 4th, just like that. We've got Oliveira. We've got Gaethje. Ferguson, technically still top 5. So if we're talking from a competitive, should Conor try and get his way back to a title? Probably shouldn't fight Nate Diaz. But then it's like, okay, but if we do Conor and Tony, let's say, can we make that a pay-per-view headliner without a belt? Do you guys see where the issue is here? You know?
It's like, truthfully, I could see there being a time. Now, this would be Conor losing multiple more times. I could see him being a co-main. I could.
Can you? Really?
I really think he could. I mean, if Nate Diaz can co-main, I still think Jorge Masvidal can co-main. I know he's a bigger star than those two. But again, what got him to be this star in the first place? It all started with his ability to fight.
And winning.
And the way he spoke. Well, he's already stopped talking shit.
There are, like, if he were to get Nate again, we would see some resurgence of the old, but sure. I get what you're saying. The only other fight I see in this lightweight division that would get a little, that shit talk, would be Conor and Justin Gaethje. I don't think they like each other very much. Outside of them, there's not, anyway.
So, the reason why Nate Diaz fight makes the most sense to me is because, truthfully, I thought the fight with Dustin, like, I don't think it was like a sign that Conor's lost a step or.
No.
Time will tell because it's the chin. He did get knocked out first time ever.
That's true.
But as far as his performance, I just thought Dustin had a beautiful game plan.
Dustin had a great game plan
and executed it almost perfectly, and was able to not get. And especially once he got hit with one of Conor's shots, and he was like, "Okay, I can take it."
Yeah.
He got so much more confident, and that's just the way it goes. Sometimes Conor got caught. His leg was busted up. It happens. I could totally foresee him, if he wins one more, I'm sure the UFC would put him back in title picture.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he could fight for a belt again. The approach I'm taking, though, is that really what's going to be more important to Conor at this point? I don't even know if that's the right question.
It should be a title. And legacy. It's not money.
I mean, but at the same time, like, the Nate Diaz fight probably is the best fight to take if you want to get back to a title fight. Because people value that win more than a Dan Hooker win. Or
Which
Tony
is
Ferguson win.
That's unfortunate.
An RDA win.
Yeah, the casual, maybe.
I mean, Nate Diaz could compete with those guys.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying he couldn't compete, but a win, like caliber of a win over, like, well, Tony's on a 2-fight losing streak, but say Conor were to beat a guy like a Gaethje or something, that should be held in so much higher regard than a win right now in the current state of Nate Diaz.
It's just like people are acting like this loss to Poirier is the worst thing ever because people
just aren't respecting Dustin at all. It's pretty sad.
Yeah, and kind of part of that. I mean, that's kind of what happens when you hit that level of stardom. It's like the reverse end. It's like you get all these positives. This is the downside to it. It's like you're held under this microscope, and now since you've lost to a guy who doesn't have as many Instagram followers as you, people act like he's a shit fighter. It's like that's not true. He's actually really good.
Dustin Poirier is world class.
Yeah, might be the next champion.
And really, if you're looking at the division right now, technically, might just be the best lightweight in the world if Khabib's retired. Another reason I do like Conor Nate. This is kind of something we didn't touch on, but if they do this fight. Because let's see, we're in January. I mean, you could see Conor fight again in May, June. Yeah. It depends on the leg. He technically has a 6-month medical suspension, 180 days, but that can be shorter once his leg gets cleared. So it's technically 180 days, but that can be cut down. So don't put that in too much perspective. But if he gets the fight with Nate, it allows time for the top 5 of that division to play out as well. So I do like that for that reason too.
Yeah, I think my biggest thing is Conor needs to decide, in my opinion, like, all right, how many fights does he realistically have left? Especially if he loses more. So to me, that Nate Diaz fight's the biggest fight you can make right now. I mean, maybe the Poirier trilogy would be bigger. I don't know.
Well, okay. So I'm not opposed to the Conor and Dustin immediate trilogy if it wasn't for the fact that Dustin's next fight has to be for a belt. That's where the problem is. You
don't think they should be fighting for a belt because Conor just got beaten.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think that's... I agree.
But the trilogy as a whole, of course I would love to.
It might sell better than Conor Nate 3 at this point.
They were discussing that.
Right now, I'm sticking that Conor Nate 3 is the biggest fight you can make for Conor.
And if that fight happens, that's just better for the whole division.
It is.
Because other people get to fight as well.
Yeah, and if Conor wins that, then he might be in the picture for a title shot, or maybe he does fight, with Justin Gaethje, or, maybe you do maybe Poirier loses to Oliveira, and you do Poirier-Conor 3, and the winner fights for a belt.
Yeah, something.
So, but if Conor loses to Nate, which he could do,
we have a whole nother episode.
Then at that point you're basically just trying to salvage as much value as you can out of his star power.
Yeah.
And that's why the Conor or the Nate fight's kind of safe in my opinion.
It is a safer fight.
If you book him against Dan Hooker or RDA,
a Tony, an RDA,
Paul
any
Felder,
of it, a Gaethje, a Chandler, any of them.
And
that division is killers.
And they beat him or even knock him out or starch him.
And they're not as big of a name as Nate. So it's like...
But if Nate's already beaten him.
Exactly.
So it's like, it's a safer...
Although it technically might be, and I'm putting quotes on this, a worse loss. I'm not saying that in a mean way, but like, the loss would be looked at, losing to an unranked Nate because of Nate's star and name power is a better loss than actually losing to like a number 1 ranked Justin Gaethje.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I agree with you. It's just how... Because ultimately, star power is carried by casuals, not by hardcore fans.
Yeah.
There's more of casuals.
And part of it is like, what is the UFC thinking? What do they want to do?
Well, I think Dana and the UFC, they definitely still just look at this like, okay, he lost, but he's still gonna bounce back and be our champion.
Tuesdays are war room meetings, right? So maybe something happens.
Yeah, I don't know what they're thinking. I know it wasn't the outcome they were hoping for. I mean, that's never been more obvious than the lead up to this one for me. I'm sure it's happened before, but the fact that Dana was like, they were out basically showing clips of him talking to Khabib about a rematch with Conor. It's like you can tell what they wanted here, but
and it was always like, if Conor wins,
then this can happen.
If Conor wins, not Dana did do a decent job of saying, this is still a different Dustin, blah blah blah, but.
You
Connor's
can just tell.
Your bank account.
And now it's in a weird spot where if he loses to like a Nate Diaz, we don't know.
Or just a loss in general.
Yeah,
really.
I mean,
it's
it does affect his ability to sell. That's why I think at some point you could see him in a co-main. I mean, if he loses to Nate Diaz in a trilogy, his next fight could realistically be... honestly, I think before that happens, I think he would just retire.
Oh, I was going to say, maybe this is a hot take, maybe it's not, but I think we see Conor retire before we ever see him in something that's not a main event.
And I think that's completely the case. He has too much of an ego and to ever be less than...
And really, he has
They wanted him and Cerrone to be a co-main originally. People don't realize that.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and he was like, no.
And he gets a slice on the pay-per-view.
Yeah, so I definitely think we'll see Conor retire before something like that happens. But that leads us into another point. How many more fights does he have, though, especially if he loses to Nate Diaz, let's say May, do you see him really fight again? There's no other fight that's really that big, but also that competitive.
Yeah, because what
if
if he loses to Nate, but Dustin does become the champ? You can't do that trilogy until Dustin were to lose the belt.
And it's just if Conor loses to Nate, let's say it's a pretty quick loss.
If he gets
finished early or something, then you're oh boy, he's starting to slip, right?
Yeah.
What other fight is there that would sell very well but is also very competitive?
Yeah.
Because him and Nate is a very competitive fight on paper right now. Both guys are in similar kind of states, that inactivity, the star power, but they're also I think Nate is a top 10 guy at lightweight, but I also think that him and Conor's styles just mesh well together where either guy could really win on any day. And
well, I mean, and Nate's getting older, too, so we can't just keep holding Nate out on the shelf. I know some of it's due to Nate,
right?
Wanting the money fights, which is fine. He paid his dues, just like Dustin. But yeah, man, I think a lot of it does come down to what the UFC wants to do. What does Dustin want to do? I don't know. There's a lot of factors here, but I know that we're going to see Conor again. It is, though, how many more times are we going to see Conor again? So
that would be my question. My biggest question is, how many more, especially with another loss?
Yeah.
If he wins, I think that's going to be my answer for the state of, right? If Conor wins his next fight, I think you're still back on the train of...
And I think we see him again.
You're back in the season.
I think we see him again this year. Assuming when that fight happens in 2021 anyway.
So. While if he loses, I think he might be done.
Yep. And, really...
This is all hearsay.
It's not just we're not shitting on him. We're just kind of look at it glass half empty and glass half full. And Conor's accomplished a lot. He really has.
Yeah.
I mean, he's 10-3 in the UFC, 3 losses. Nate Diaz, Habib, Dustin Poirier. Not bad losses. And he's beaten a bunch of guys. He's a future Hall of Famer, the first 2-weight world champion simultaneous. So many records, box office records, quickest title fight finish, and the list just goes on and on. So it's really, there isn't much left to accomplish, and it comes down to just, are you fighting for legacy, or is your legacy cemented enough for you to feel comfortable leaving? So,
yeah.
Third kid on the way,
yeah.
In the summer. Makes life a little more stressful, I'd have to imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And all the business endeavors, so much money, and the clothing, the freaking whiskey. It's just, there's bigger things, it seems, that are happening in his life now. In my opinion.
I saw this brought up, I want to say it was on Helwani in DC. Could be wrong about that, but basically they were talking about how, when you're a guy like Conor McGregor at that power, that star power, your training camps are based around you, what you want to do.
Right.
So he comes in and decides what he wants to do that day, and the training partners follow suit. He doesn't have, I know John Kavanaugh's a great coach, but John Kavanaugh's not getting on his ass every day necessarily. Conor's just different. This isn't a guy think of a guy, God, I don't even know who to compare. Look at a guy like Chris Weidman or someone who trains with Ray Longo and Matt Serra, and they're on his ass all the time.
Yeah.
Conor doesn't have that. He doesn't have someone that puts a training camp in place for him anymore, which it's kind of the point of Khabib's Twitter post he made where he was talking about like when you
and then going to Portugal and
so when you leave the training partners behind that got you to the dance, like this is what happens. So the question was kind of like, could Conor really ever do that due to all these outside factors he's got? You know, he's this business
mogul. Really.
Like he's how rich and famous he is, all these appearances he has to make, you know, can he ever really be all about MMA again?
Right.
It's that you know, that other side of fame. You know, Ronda Rousey went through it. We saw that kind of turn
and it is part of it is hard to watch and see it play out. You know, it's just
if that's the route we're going. You know, I still think Conor can salvage it. If it feels like we're being maybe I might be being a little too like pessimistic, but I just like to put it out there because we're weighing all the options.
Exactly.
And on the other end, if he goes and beats Nate Diaz,
he could go on a tear.
Like I would predict him to beat Nate Diaz in a third fight, and if he does, I think he would fight the winner of Poirier Oliveira for the belt. I just think that's what the UFC would do, and he could very well win that fight. Not sure if I would pick him in either one, but it's still an option.
Yeah.
Especially like I think he would have a better chance against Poirier than Oliveira.
Charlie Olive, maybe.
Yeah. So I still think that Conor has. I think this next fight for him is a huge crossroads.
It's huge. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It's a huge crossroads.
Yeah.
And that a lot will be answered. Maybe. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe. He could totally be a guy though that starts a couple years down the line. He comes back and fights some guy, and it'll sell around 1 million buys.
Yeah.
Then he'll leave again, and maybe a couple years after that, he'll come back and fight someone else. I could totally see him going that route too, where it's just like he'll make an appearance every couple of years, but it's like
Brock.
But this is kind of my thing is like, is he gonna kind of embrace just being that legend status, right? Like the legend fights, or is he still looking for the fights that's gonna get him to a title fight?
Yeah,
that's why I think Nate Diaz is like the best of both, or the closest thing to both. Legend fight, but also competitive fight that can get you a title fight off of it.
You know, trilogy 1-1. Somebody's got to win.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
So that's kind of where I'm going to leave the state of Conor McGregor. Do you have any final thoughts?
I don't think there's any more to add.
We talked for a while.
That was a conversation and a half.
It was. So thank you guys. For those of you that are still listening, thank you for grinding it out with us. This was definitely not what we thought was going to happen, but that's why I love this format. We just talk and
shoot the breeze.
Yeah. So let us know your thoughts.
Yeah, join in on the conversation.
Let us know what your thoughts are of Conor McGregor. Where do you think he stands right now? Where do you think his future lies? You know, do you think he's done?
Is the legacy cemented?
Do you think it's done?
Yeah.
You know, is the best days behind him, or do you think that this is just a blip on, you know, just a mark on his story, and he's gonna override this one and bounce back and become champ again? Let us know. Until then. Next week.
We won't be seeing you guys for a little while.
There's no event this Saturday, so there won't be any preview or recap on Friday or Monday. But we will be seeing you guys Friday,
February 5th.
February 5th, my mom's birthday.
Big episode.
Big episode. So we're going to be previewing a huge fight night. Headlined by Alistair Overeem versus Alexander Volkov. Big heavyweight fight there. There's a lot of other big fights on the card. I want to give a shout out to Dom. He is now a writer for Overtime Heroics, as I keep plugging on here. He's now a member of the MMA Elite. He's a writer on their staff. He does some great articles for them. Do you want to touch on any that you have coming up?
Fun one coming up, actually.
I was going to talk about the one for that card, but I didn't know if you wanted to surprise it.
So January 31st, or that's the plan anyway. January 31st or February 1st, I'm going to start my own kind of series for Overtime Heroics. I'm going to be doing a UFC recap of that month. So obviously the first one's going to be month of July. I'm going to get into my own, you know, you guys used to hear the nitty gritty on the podcast. I'm doing a nitty gritty in the article, breaking down all the fights, the finishes, the decisions, all the fun stats, and then kind of going into my own biggest takeaways from each month. Mm-hmm. So just a couple hints coming up. Some of my takeaways from this month: UFC debuts on ABC. Max's masterpiece, as I like to call it. Fans are back, kind of, and then I did a good write-up on Dustin as my last takeaway, so I'm looking forward to getting that out. And then, as Noah mentioned, I do have another preview coming up for that card, and
it's Beneil Dariush and Carlos Diego Ferreira.
You know, and I texted Noah last night. I said, man, guess what fight I got? Guess what I get to preview? Guessed it spot on.
I knew it. I just know you too well.
64 podcast episodes in, it's like, what else does this guy need to know? You know?
Yeah.
So, looking forward to that. So, any support on that's appreciated. But thanks for the support on the podcast as well. Thanks for grinding through this marathon with us. We know it's going to be like 9 days until our next episode, but it's a little just break, because then starting with that preview on Friday the 5th, we get back into some normalcy, you know.
March and April are looking.
Yeah, so we went 6 episodes in 10 days. Now we're doing a nice little break, regroup, and then we're back into normalcy.
Yeah,
so.
Agreed. Some other fights on that card: Corey Sandhagen versus Frankie Edgar. That's probably a title eliminator.
Mm-hmm.
Dariush Ferreira, Clay Guida, Michael Johnson, Pantoja, Manel Cape. Manel Cape making his debut.
Molly Meatball in the prelims.
Molly Meatball, yep. Nico Montano, the OG women's flyweight champ.
She's like a co-main or third fight on the main card or something, I think.
I don't know.
She's on the main card. I don't know.
Cody Stamen, Andre Ewell.
Ooh, that's a fun fight.
Very good fights on this card. I mean, Devontae Smith is on there. Mike Rodriguez. Yeah, it's Marion Renault, Macy Chason. Good fights, man. Odie Osborne. A lot of good fighters on there.
February has a lot to live up to because it's sandwiched in between an amazing month of January with the 3 events on Fight Island, and March is stupid.
March is
2
stupid.
pay-per-views, 5 title fights, Hamzat and Leon in the middle. February has a lot to live up to because they are stuck in a shit sandwich.
Lucky for them.
That's just true.
Fights aren't made on paper.
That's true.
They're made in the octagon. Until then, Dominic Slee, tell the good people where they can find you on social media.
Twitter, Instagram, at DSlee14. Podcast on Twitter and Instagram, at BAJ_MMA podcast.
And as for me, if you go to my bio on Twitter or Instagram, at ntbaker_, you'll be taken to our link tree, which gives you the links to all the platforms that the podcast is on, along with the social media platforms. That includes the Twitter, the Instagram, the YouTube channel, along with Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. It's all on there, baby. And there's a couple links for the Anchor page. The first one, recording a voice message. Y'all know we're trying to hit it hard in 2021.
Especially now.
Yeah. You all heard Tyler's beautiful
y'all
voice.
have something to kind of compete with.
If you heard his beautiful voice on Friday, yeah, it could be you. You can record up to a 60-second clip if you go to that link. You could talk about an upcoming fight, a news story. If you just want to say hi or tell us we're a piece of shit, you can do it there. And there's another link if you want to become a supporter of the podcast. That just provides with a few dollars a month, and all that money goes back into improving the quality of the podcast, whether it be improving the audio equipment or down the line doing a video podcast. So again, you can find all of that if you go to my bio on Twitter, Instagram, at ntbaker_. With that, we're out. We'll see y'all on February 6th.
February 5th.
February 5th.
Okay.